Hi there, my name is Ron Rogers. And is there a method to the madness of Air Force pilot training? Well, yes, there is, and I think this is a factor in the C-17 airshow accident, and I'm going to talk about that in a very soon upcoming video that you can see shortly after this one. But I think certain aspects of Air Force pilot training actually lent themselves to that accident. Also, certain characteristics. Now, a lot of people compare that C-17 in 2010. It was airshow practice up at Albendorf Air Force Base, and they compare that to the Fairchild accident back in 1994. And okay, both of those were practice for air shows, but I think there's a lot of very distinct differences, and I think certain aspects of the way the Air Force trains pilot and the flight characteristics of the C-17 specifically could lead it into this. And I'll go in more detail when I talk about that accident. But first of all, back in the olden days, the dark ages, 1970, I went through pilot training in 1973, and there was a book that I got, and it was kind of interesting. The Vietnam War was going on. There were a lot of campus protests, and they would attack the bookstore and break out all the windows in Iowa City. And I actually ordered this book, which was kind of interesting because there was a lot of anti-war stuff going on, and I ordered a book about the making of the modern fighter pilot. And one of the things they talked about was every man a tiger. Well, this is before women kind of got involved in pilot training. Now, things have changed a lot. I went through Vance Air Force Base, and back then we had T-37s and T-38s, and they hadn't dumbed down the engines yet on the C model of the T-38, although the avionics is just beautiful. Slight digression there. Now we got the T6, okay, and we've got the Little Beach business jet there. Back then, we washed out a lot of people who couldn't fly formation in the T-38. They could spend the rest of their careers flying C-141s, C-5s, C-130s, anything like that that wouldn't demand the high-speed flight, formation flying of a T-38, and we washed them out. The instructors hated doing it. But that was the program. Every man had to be a fighter pilot. Well, no, every man or woman does not have to be a fighter pilot. There's plenty of jobs out there for non-fighter pilots, and we don't need to wash people out for that. But finally, and they had been talking about it for ages, they finally got their act together, and they do two tracks now. And of course, that has allowed a lot of people to successfully complete pilot training that would have been washed out. But let's talk about the airplanes they use. And I'm going to use the T-37 because I got over 1,000 hours of instruction time in that. And I'm also was an instructor in the T-38 and a senior flight examiner out at the Flight Test Center. So the T-37, that's got your standard fat wing, your airfoil that has the very normal to a civilian pilot flight characteristics, where you have a very noticeable and apparent stall break. When you get the stall buffet or the artificial stall warning, that tells you that you get a little bit slower and things aren't going to go well and the thing's going to stall on you. Well, swept wing aerodynamics is a bit different. You look at the CLmax curve on the T-38. It has a, not only that, but it's a symmetrical airfoil. It's a swept wing, and it's built that way for the high-speed characteristics of the T-38 aircraft. And it's teaching people, Air Force pilots, and of course the Navy has a similar program. It's teaching them to fly high-speed fighter-type aircraft. And these aircraft fly differently. The symmetrical airfoil is a whole different animal. Okay, now the top one is like the T-37, the non-symmetrical airfoil. It's the cambered airfoil, the fat wing, and the one on the bottom is symmetrical. And this is actually pretty fat for most symmetrical airfoils, and it's a different wing. Now, I almost completed my master's degree in aerodynamics, and I was also working on a dual master's in electrical engineering, and that's actually why I got out of the Air Force, because they wanted to put me in a ground job, and I wanted to fly. And I was 7 hours short of completing the master's, the dual master's program, so I never got my master's degree in that. I had to spend my time getting my ATP rating and stuff like that in an Apache. I digress here. That was quite an adventure, flying a T-38 and an Apache at the same time. Talk about different animals, but I digress. Anyway, basic civilian airplanes. Okay, like your Cessna 172, 152. I've owned I owned a 172 RG and I owned a 152, and I taught my son to fly, who became an airline pilot. But these are the basic fat wing airplanes, and they have the basic flight characteristics that civilian pilots are experienced in, but never see the symmetrical airfoil unless you go out and buy an extra and you fly aerobatics. And symmetrical airfoils are great for aerobatics because you're the same pitch attitude, right side up, upside down. Even though my Great Lakes does have a fat wing, it's an old design, but I'm digressing all over the place. Okay, so basically your 172, it's got normal flight characteristics. That's what everybody learns. But now let's talk about the swept wing aircraft, the high-speed aircraft. Okay, there's a T-38. Gosh, I love that. That's got a really thin wing. And there's also the F-104, which people argue it almost doesn't even have a wing. Now, in the F-104, you can be at 300 knots, and if you go into a 30-degree bank turn, you get you get buffet. Okay, the swept wing aircraft, you start getting buffet a lot earlier. When you're flying the traffic pattern of T-38, you are in buffet. And you're just used to it. That's the way it works. The F-104, okay, 30 degrees of bank, that's 1.15 Gs. That's a 15% increase in G, and that's enough that it puts you in the buffet. It puts you in airflow separation. Well, how do you tell when you've stalled a symmetrical airfoil? Well, that's a good question, because the curve, as you noticed, was so flat. Well, what happens is, if you're coming around the final turn, the T-38, and this has bit a few people because, yeah, you're in buffet. Okay, that's normal. Well, if you get slow, you're going to get increased buffet. And the indication that you're losing lift is that you're increased buffet. And sometimes the increased buffet can get very intense, and the descent rate picks up on you. The airplane just basically starts to fall out of the sky. Okay, well, let's talk about the C-17 just for fun, and I'm going to talk about this in the accident. That's part of the whole thing. The C-17, it's swept wing, but it's a normal, reasonably cambered airfoil. Okay, but this airplane will fly in buffet on approach, because when you're doing the steep approaches, you can look at the flaps there. The engines blow air through the flaps, and that gives you buffet. Well, the other thing, and part of this direct lift, and when I flew the C-17 in my flight evaluation, I'll talk about how this setup works. But when you're flying in the direct lift mode, you've got the engine power up, and you've got the spoilers extended. So you have a high drag situation, and if you need if you get low on glide slope, you're coming in on a 4.5 degree approach. You get low, you push the throttles forward. Well, the engines are already at high power setting, so there's virtually no spool up time. But what happens is the spoilers go down, and you almost virtually don't have to add any thrust, because you just take the spoilers down, and then if you pull the power back, the engines are kept up, but the spoilers come up and increase your rate of descent. So you're flying this thing, it's in buffet. So a pilot trained in the Air Force to fly T-38s will be used to flying this C-17 in buffet. And it takes on kind of a different feeling. It makes you feel like you're flying an aircraft, and I'll talk about this in the accident when I talk about it. It makes you feel like you're flying an aircraft in a buffet, and that can change your perception. All right, let's go back to the 6,000-pound dog whistle here. Nice fat wing. It flies like a normal airplane. It's got a few differences. And here is the steely-eyed student. You notice if you look closely there, you can see my name tag. There's no wings above that because I'm not a pilot yet. I'm learning how to be a pilot. But okay, they give you this parachute. They give you this helmet. They put you in the cockpit there. They strap you in. You got all these checklists. You got all these procedures. It's noisy, and you got to learn pretty fast. And if you don't, they wash you out. But it's quite an interesting environment. But the airplane flies basically like a basic airplane. The only thing it doesn't do, I was used to flying aerobatics in a Citabra, a 70CA, that did not have a constant speed propeller. And when I went up on my dollar ride, that's the first ride you get in the T-37 as a student, kind of, to familiarize it with him. I asked the instructor, hey, can I do an aileron roll? So I did an aileron roll. Oh, God, I love that. I did another one. And I said, can I do a loop? And he goes, sure. So I start in the loop, and at the top of the loop in the 7ECA, because you don't want to overspeed the prop coming down the backside, you pull the power to idle. Well, in the top of the loop, now, you got fuel controls and jet engines. You don't need to do that. You're not going to overspeed the jet engine. I'm upside down the loop, and I pull the power to idle. And my instructor goes, what the heck? First of all, he thought we'd lost both engines because it suddenly got quiet. And then he realized I had pulled the power. And he goes, why did you pull the power? And I said, so I don't overspeed the engines. And he goes, no, kid, we need to talk. Okay, big mistake. But anyway, that was a fun first ride. All right, so I get through that. Now I'm in the T-38, and this is just a different animal. I mean, this thing is fast. It is fun. 30,000 feet per minute from the deck in afterburner. We didn't get to kind of do that in pilot training. I did out at Edwards routinely, burner climbs from the deck, but that's special use airspace, different story. But, this thing is fun and sensitive. First time I'm flying it as a student, I'm holding the stick, and I'm getting this lateral oscillation because just little movements in the stick. I mean, 720 degrees rate of roll, and it does do that with full stick deflection. I mean, this thing really takes off. Oh, it was fun. High performance aircraft. And there is the really studly student. Look at that guy getting ready to go fly in the T-38 there. Still a student. I mean, okay. I get done with the T-37 program. I've got 85 hours of military flight time. I'm flying the T-38. I'm flying this solo. I do not even have 100 hours of military flight time. Now, I flew a little bit before that. I flew Citabra and that, so I had about 150 hours of civilian time. But okay, less than 100 hours military flight time, maybe 250 hours total flight time, and I'm flying this supersonic aircraft. I mean, talk about a kick in the pants, and from a guy who's just kind of a brand new pilot. I mean, they paid me to do this. Wow. But then again, I get to go out at Edwards, and out there, I get to fly the 104 with NASA, and you can see the little bit of droop. This thing had leading edge devices, and that's the only way that you could actually generate much lift at all on the wing. And there's the picture again of the two aircraft. Now we're back in the whole swept wing thing, and this is the different airplane, and this is a part of training that, of course, most civilian pilots never get, and they never get to experience what it is to fly this type of airplane because it is a different animal. And there we are back in the CL curves there, and like I said, you got the normal brake in the normal fat wing airplane, and then you got I'm not really sure where we are in the stall curve because in the pattern we're in buffet speed, and then we get the CL max there. We're still in buffet, and until it starts to fall off the end, you don't get to the situation where you're getting into trouble. But the stall in a swept wing symmetrical airfoil, thin airfoil, is just very insidious. And of course, they're made to go fast. And here's some cool pictures. You'll get shock waves off at just about any sharp point. And I was flying chase on like the F-16, 15, the B-1, and they're big and lots of pointy parts. And here's a picture of the F-18, of course. And you're getting shock waves all over the thing. And the thing you had to be careful when you were chasing this was not get your inlet in line with one of those shock waves because it could disturb the airflow and you could cause all sorts of problems with your engines. But now one other thing I want to mention here, and this is kind of an interesting aspect of your normal fat wing. Now normally you don't get going really high speed in this, but there is a thing called Mach tuck. And I lost a classmate, a friend of mine, a guy named Gordy, He got a T-39 to Korea, which is the little business jet, the twin hair dryers we called it. They weren't terribly powerful engines, and it was used for executive transport. Well, he became an instructor in it, and they decided they were going to do loops in the aircraft. Now, I've done a lot of rolls in aircraft that weren't supposed to do rolls in flight test, not transports, just little ones at Cessna flight test. The 300, 400 series of aircraft, but loops are a different matter, and they got themselves into a situation known as Mach tuck, where you've got the regular airfoil that's not meant to go supersonic, but you go fast enough, you get supersonic flow over the wing, you get transonic where you're kind of in between, and then you get supersonic, and you get this shock wave. Well, this shock wave causes a lot of problem, and it gets you into what's known as Mach tuck. Now, the T-37 had an issue with Mach tuck, but we typically didn't see it, and we never demonstrated it to anybody. But the T-37 wasn't terribly powerful. Basically, you got that little clear needle there, and you see the hash mark needles. And the thing is, you didn't cross the needles, because that was your Mach limiting needle on the airspeed indicator, and if you exceeded that barber pole indicator there, you were in the Mach tuck region, and that was not a good place to be. Well, now I go to the A-37. Okay, the A-37 is a much more powerful airplane, and it's heavier and stuff like that. And here's the little things out of the Dash 1. Now, for any of you purists there, that airspeed indicator that I showed was actually out of the T-37 Dash 1, the flight manual. I didn't have the A-37 flight manual didn't have a good picture of the airspeed indicator, so I wanted to use that. Now, okay, it's got some notes in there, the A-37 manual about diving, and if you start to lose directional stability, because the A-37, the T-37, they're the only aircraft ever designed to fly blunt in first. Now, I know somebody's going to say, oh, there's other aircraft like that. Okay, but that was our joke. The only aircraft designed to fly blunt in first. So you get a little bit of directional instability there, because that nose kind of gives you a little bit of wallowing. Well, right here it says, and it talks about it, yeah, you don't want to exceed that critical Mach number, and you get yourself into problem. And of course, I like this warning here. If you are lower than 10,000 feet above the terrain before buffeting stops and pullout begins, eject. Well, guess what? I'm getting checked out in the A-37, local checkout, and the instructor says, oh, let me show you about Mach tuck, and I'll show you about crossing the needles here. And we're up in the area, we're about 15,000 feet, and he rolls it on over, and we start on down. And, with the power of those J85 engines, oh boy, we crossed the needles like that. We got into Mach tuck, and oh, isn't that interesting? Well, the bottom of the area was 10,000 feet, our practice area, and that was about 8,000 feet above the ground. Well, okay, I would assume this guy had done this demonstration before, but we go screaming through the bottom of that area, through the 10,000 foot floor, and we're out of our airspace, and we're back in kind of civilian airspace here again, and we go punching through that, and of course we're well above 250, and we punch through that. The needles are crossed, and we're starting the recovery. He's demonstrating this, so the recovery is being started a little bit late. And if I had strictly adhered to that warning, I would have punched out, and that would have been a high-speed ejection, relatively. And I wasn't too excited about that, but pulled the power back, dropped the speed brakes. It didn't slow down as rapidly as you might think for as much drags out there, but we got the needles uncrossed. And until you uncross those needles, you do not pull out of a Mach tuck situation. So it wasn't a good deal. We finally pulled out at about 8,000 feet, maybe a little bit lower than that, but you could see the recovery was coming, and that was kind of like, well, that was kind of stupid, wasn't it? But yeah, there's a lot of things that you end up doing unintentionally that are kind of stupid, and some people come out alive. Some people, like Gordy and the other instructors did not recover the T-39, and they impacted the ground in Korea. And as an actual little side story, when I was in Wichita, there was another ham radio operator that we were talking, and it ended up that his son-in-law went out there actually to replace the crew that had been lost in the accident. So it was kind of a small world. But anyway, that's a little bit of talk about Air Force training, high-speed flight, how it may have had somewhat of an issue with the C-17, and I will develop that more when I talk about the accident. But anyway, that's a little bit about kind of the madness, the method to the madness in Air Force pilot training, and how you come into kind of a conventional aircraft, and then they ease you in to the more interesting flying aircraft, because in the military you can fly a bunch of extremely interesting aircraft that have all sorts of very interesting flight characteristics. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching.